What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Discovering Bob Dylan podcast. It has been a long time. Our recording schedule interrupted by the launch of Taste Like Records label, Jason's debut production of Nordista Freeze's new album, On the Banks of Disappearing, available now at tastelikerecords.com. Some things going on with Dylan. I don't know if he wants to talk about it, but he can bring it up in a moment. Just we've been all the holidays. It's been wild around these parts. So we've kind of been neglecting our boy Bob Dylan. So hopefully we can do right by him on today's episode when we are we have listened to an interesting one from him, Falling Time Out of Mind. We had Love and Theft, which came out on September 11th, 2001. Not a great day to release an album. Critically beloved, popular with the audiences. It went to number 5 in the US, number 3 in the UK, and kind of continued his hot streak after Time Out of Mind, which was his, one of many, many, many comeback albums for him. We listened to that one. That episode isn't out yet while we were recording this, but I'm sure there are a lot of angry comments that will be waiting for me after that one. But that is neither here nor there. Dylan, how are you? How are you doing? If you want to talk about your problems, your troubles, or if you just want to talk straight Bob Dylan today, either way, baby.
Well, it started when I was about 4 years old. No, I'm good. I'm tired, very, very tired. It has been a minute. Excited to be back here. Excited to be talking Bob. Yeah, we've both been going through a bunch of stuff. What was the word you used earlier? A quademic going on? Is that
That is just with the flu, COVID, all this stuff. That doesn't even get into personal lives and everything else. It's just a shit storm basically lately. So
But you know what? We're alive. We are somewhat healthy, I believe. You know, so let's embrace it. I think, we deserve to be in good spirits because, we're about to talk about an album that finds our boy in really good spirits. And I mean, I'm trying to think of the last record that found him in such, I think, a relatively happy place, that was at least deserved, that wasn't marred by, 80s excess and cocaine and alcohol and everything like that. I've been looking forward to this one for a long, long time. This was the first Bob Dylan album that I listened to, or it was the first Bob Dylan studio album that came out after I had already become a fan. I was only 10 years old when it came out, but I already saw him in the year 2000. I already began diving into his back catalog, so this was a big deal. But leading up to this, I think there's two things that we should touch on. I'm sure you've got them there in your notes. We've just recently talked about Time Out of Mind from 1997. The next year, 1998, we get the long-awaited fourth volume of the bootleg series, which had kicked off in 1991 with the first three volumes all in one box set. And yeah, kicking it off with a bang. Now that we're in the kind of individual installments of this series, they started at a great place. We have the infamous 1966 quote unquote Royal Albert Hall concert, which of course is when someone yells near the end of Bob and the Hawks electric set. They yelled Judas at him because he had betrayed all of the folkies, and he replies by saying, "I don't believe you. You're a liar." Turns around and says, "Play it fucking loud," and they rip into the most acidic version of Like a Rolling Stone. True to its name, the bootleg series, it had been bootlegged for years as the quote-unquote Royal Albert Hall. It actually took place in Manchester, England, at the Free Trade Hall. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that you have not listened to this performance in its entirety. Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, But you should. You should someday. It's highly worth it. Very, very good stuff.
That'll be on our outtakes, our Discovering Bob Dylan podcast, volume 12 or something. We'll put that out in like 30 years.
Yes, of course. Well, yeah, at our current rate of recording, that's I think where we're
That's
at.
true.
But yeah, I mean, it was pretty timely too. Time Out of Mind really kind of rocketed him back into the good graces of both fans and critics. So, what better way to capitalize on that, than to release this archival footage of, his most celebrated era of music, recorded, I believe, after Blonde on Blonde has been tracked, but before it was released. But you do get a bunch of songs from that, and then, of course, from Bring It All Back Home and Highway 61 as well. Great performance. And then in 2000, our boy Bob wins himself an Academy Award for Best Original Song for Things Have Changed, which was, I don't know if it was written for the soundtrack or if it was one of those things where, they approached him for a song. He said, well, I have this, but the classic 2000 film Wonder Boys, which don't know if you've seen the movie. I know I did send you the song to listen to, but and since 2000, Bob has been touring with the Oscar on stage with him on top of his amp. Some there's some deliberating whether it's a fake Oscar or whether it's the real thing, but he's very clearly proud of it, and he still plays that song quite a bit. But yeah, did you check that one out?
I did. I believe I've seen Wonder Boys. It is set or was shot in Pittsburgh. I can't remember which one. So
Did not know that.
Pittsburghers love anything that was filmed or produced or by or like, second cousin was from Pittsburgh and, they love Pittsburgh. So by law, we have to see everything produced from out of Pittsburgh.
Sure, 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 sure. Well, I don't know about you, but I think it's a great song. I think it's got a really great slinky groove to it. I think Bob's got a really cool growl. It actually, I think it sort of foreshadows what we get the next year in Love and Theft. Not as, reverby, swampy as the Lanois productions. A lot of closer mic'd, drier sounds. Everything cuts through really well. Great lyrics, and like Love and Theft, a lot of funny lyrics. I think it's a really, really great tune.
Yeah, I immediately, could tell this was no longer Lanois behind the boards on that one. And thus, I'm sure everyone has seen the Time Out of Mind episode by now. I preferred the sound he was going for on that song much more than the Time Out of Mind production. And it did feel, thematically similar to what he was doing on Love and Theft. I can't remember if I listened to that song before I had listened to the Love and Theft again, but um, it was definitely welcome, that sound for sure.
Yeah, and I even have vague memories of it being released. Again, I was 9 years old, but already kind of going down the rabbit hole. Like it was a quote unquote big deal within the Dylan community, because when was the last time that Bob had put out a great record and then the next thing he put out was also really good? Like he put out Oh Mercy only for it to be followed by Under the Red Sky. And you and I were both fans of the mid 90s acoustic records, but those were somewhat unheralded at the time. So, you finally had a great record in Time Out of Mind, then a few years later, bam, brand new original song that sounds different and cool and just as good, as quite a lot of stuff on the album before. So, um, Bob heads were pretty high on it, if I remember at the time. I remember when he played it at the first show I saw in 2000. There was a buzz when he played it, which, for a quote unquote legacy artist to play a new song and get a good reaction is, not
That's not
not
normal.
something you
It's not
see
normal.
every day. Um, But like I said, getting into Love and Theft now, foreshadowing that, like we said, Lanois is out the door. This record is produced solely by one Mr. Jack Frost. He of many Christmas family films, among other things, starring Michael Keaton, perhaps. But actually just an alias for Bob. He's reached the point now, 2001, he's turning 60 years old, right? Yeah, he's born in 1941, so he's turning 60. He says, "You know what? I don't need to listen to anyone anymore," which is a problem that he kind of ran into in the 80s, but now he's in a much better place. It's a very, very different record, and I've got, of course, so many thoughts on these songs of this album, the sound of this album. But I definitely want to hear from you first. And we recorded the Time Out of Mind episode about 7 years ago now. I think you may have alluded at the end of the last episode that your mom was a fan of this record and you had heard it maybe when it came out.
My mother was a fan, still is probably. And I remember hearing songs from it. I doubt I heard the entire album because it is a lengthy Bob Dylan release, as all of them seem to be. So I doubt that I heard every song. I do remember hearing some of it, and I wasn't that surprised when I listened to it in full for this show. The sound of it was at least a little bit familiar, which it's been a long time since I could say that about a Bob Dylan album. Certainly not Time Out of Mind. That was unfamiliar. And I don't know, perhaps that plays into why I did not take to it very much. I also just don't like Daniel Lanois in the 90s very much. It also has a big part of it, I'm sure. And I mean, I'm not alone about the production because Dylan also hated the way Lanois recorded his vocals. And he brought in a young contemporary hotshot engineer named Chris Shaw to handle it in a more modern way. He wanted it to sound like it was, from the time period he was recording it, unlike whatever Lanois was doing. So I'm with him on that one. And a couple other things real quick before I give my thoughts on the album. 31st studio album, so I got to give Dylan some credit there. There's not very many artists in the history of music who can put out, 31, their 31st studio album still being as heralded as this one. Got a rare A plus from Robert Christgau in the Village Voice, and he doesn't hand those out to just anybody. So that's good. A lot of four-star reviews, a lot of, A's and up, nines out of tens. People really like this one. It was recorded with his Neverending Tour band, kind of like how he did Saved. Hmm. Really in sync with these cats. No guest stars, no Daniel Lanois. It's just Dylan and his dudes ripping through some songs, 12 songs, recorded in 12 days. Midtown Manhattan, Clinton recording, Manhattan. And apparently these sessions were very spontaneous, and Bob was really in control, which we talked about how in control he was back in the 80s. So this is a new side of Bob. I don't know if he was sober now or if he had cleaned up his act in the 90s, maybe he's coming out of all the drugs and such now. You might be able to answer that. But yeah, it just seemed like he was very impressive to his band and very much in control of the situation. Dylan himself called it a greatest hits album without the hits. He might be right. He might be right. What does that mean, though? What does that mean? Uh, it was nominated for Album of the Year at the 44th Grammys, but lost to the unstoppable juggernaut that is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The soundtrack, which I remember when that came out, that was a big, big deal.
That was also released in the year 2000, so I wonder what the date staggering. Yeah, there's always something going on there.
Feel like that movie probably came out towards the end of the year in time for award season for the Oscars. So perhaps it's like October to like February. Like it makes no sense what the Grammys are doing. But needless to say, Everybody loved it. Everyone loves it. I've never heard anyone have a bad word to say about it. It's made Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums of all time lists. I think all three updates it stayed on. A rare occasion for that. It was 467th and then 385th. And now it's 411th on the newest ranking, which lopped off a whole bunch of kind of white guy, classic rock, folk, lopped off a bunch of albums of theirs. But this one stayed on. So is there anyone who's gonna dislike this album?
There are a few people in our Discord community who are naysayers, and I know some of you out there are thinking, Discord community, whatever do you mean? Well, it's interesting because if you check in the description below, you'll find the link to the Taste Like Music Patreon, where you can support Joe, you can support Jason, and everyone who puts in so much work to making this channel, creating this content for you watching. And if you donate, I believe even as little as $1 a month, you get access to this community where you can come and spend all day talking music and other things with us and with, hundreds of other great people who we love. We do love them dearly. Yeah, I'm gonna give a shout out to my boy Rich Lotta, who's in the community. We love Rich. He's been there from the beginning. Rich does not like this record, and I've had many conversations with him about it, and he'll be in the comments, I'm sure, saying what his thoughts are. And Rich, I'm just letting you know that I respect your God-given right to be as wrong as you are. Which, of course, I suppose is my tell of saying that I love this record. I I really love this record. I think this record is easily the best thing to come out of September 11th, 2001. Um, with all due respect to the Blueprint, obviously massive hip hop release there in the early 2000s, and I can see why that would be a difficult thing for you to potentially grapple with those two things. But on a day where there's really not a whole lot to feel good about, we did get Love and Theft. Also, very underrated John Hiatt record called The Tiki Bar is Open, but that's neither here nor there.
Listen, we've beaten around the bush, I think, enough. We've teased our audience. I think we just need to get into how I feel about Love and Theft.
Yes. So, Joe, I love this record. Do you love this record?
Dylan, I think this is the best Bob Dylan album since at least the 1970s. This is a fantastic album. I'm not gonna hide the lead here. I'm not gonna bury the lead. This is what I want from Bob Dylan in the 2000s. This is what I wanted from him in the 90s and the 80s, really, but I'll take it here, 2001. I think this is his most interesting album musically since like Blonde on Blonde. Like you have to go back so far to find this mixture that he's throwing out. And it's all, really old-fashioned American music. It's Americana and blues, and there's some Tin Pan Alley. There's some jazz in here, maybe for the first time since like the late 70s, when maybe a yacht rock back then. Now it feels a little more jazzy. All that good old-fashioned American music. It's played so skillfully. His backing band, again, the best he's had, at least since Saved. And that another situation where he was out touring with a band of, pretty much no names, and they were super tight, and they knew it well, comparatively,
Yes.
no names, but they were super tight together. They had, this kind of telepathy with Dylan, obviously. Maybe Dylan was, just being in charge and sort of giving out the vibes for everyone a little bit better here in 2000. I think his vocals, well, ragged and kind of, they're dirty and they're kind of falling apart, but I think he sounds really good And I think he makes use of the graveliness and the lack of, what normally you'd consider like a great singing voice. I don't know, there's something about maybe his confidence and just, I don't know, freedom, maybe. He seems to be singing better. Like he's hitting more notes and he's trying new things I think that he hasn't done in a long time. I think, like I said, the music all played wonderfully. A lot of variety to it, which I always like. And I think he lets the music breathe a little bit more here than he usually does. Like there's some really great licks all over the place. Some really nice just like, riffs and passages. I don't know how many, full-on long solos there are, but you know, it's very noticeable that he's letting the band play. And to me, it sounds like he's letting them play more than he usually does. Even when, Slash was guesting on the record, like this feels like he trusts them more to produce what he's looking for to help, the overall sound. And I think it's a really rich album, pretty much across the board. The blues stuff, starts off with Tweedledee and Tweedledum. He called it jungle music. It's got a great driving beat to it. It's bluesy, but it's not uninteresting blues. I think there's just some really skillful little phrases and licks in there that keeps things interesting. Bob's humor comes through, which I don't know if he abandoned it in the 80s and 90s, but it really has not been as present as it used to be. And I think it's here more than in recent albums. I gotta say, the production, just comparatively to Time Out of Mind, is a million times better. I enjoy it just on a whole different level. I just don't think it's even close. I know people love Time Out of Mind and will go to bat for it, but to me, this sounds modern, but not like, it's not like new metal. It's not like Linkin Park modern. It sounds like what folk and blues should sound like in the early 2000s, which I think, the 90s was a dark time for that kind of sound. And I basically hate it across the board in the 90s. This is just a completely different, natural, rich, warm, full sounding, uh, just so much better. Mississippi, obviously a fantastic song. I think I talked about it a little bit at some point because of Sheryl Crow's version on the Globe Sessions from 98, which I really liked. And Bob's version does not disappoint in any way. Rich guitars, love the mandolin. Bob's vocals are a little rough, but you know, he carries the melody really well of the song and the vocals, which he doesn't always do, but I think he does it on this album and particularly this song really well. One of my favorite vocals of his since the 70s. And the song is like warm despite the lyrics, which are kind of depressing and, stayed in Mississippi way too long. And it's not like a happy song, but it has a richness to it, which I enjoy. There's a rockabilly song in here, which, that kind of knocked my socks off a little bit when I first heard it, Summer Days. Uh, it feels like a song you'd hear like in a bar in like I don't know, like a movie. Obviously, I wasn't around in the 80s going to bars, but like, the rockabilly sound, maybe early 80s. It just it felt like a real song, like not a rockabilly like pastiche or something like, oh, here's a rockabilly song. Like it felt like a 50s rockabilly tune played, by a contemporary band, which I think is great. The band gets a ton of nice moments in the spotlight. The guitars, especially, are great. I gotta shout them out. Charlie Sexton and who's the other
Larry
guy?
Campbell.
Yeah, yeah, Larry Campbell, Charlie Sexton. Great work across the board. There's a couple like it's not lounge, but it's like almost loungy and jazzy tunes. By and by, like the lyrics a lot. Nice poetry to it. Has a very nice mature sound, I think. It's like a mixture of jazz and blues a little bit. It's got a nice bubbly organ in it. And it's like a new sound for Bob. He's trying something new. And I think his voice sounds great in the, around the music. I think it's a good, just a good sound for where he's at in his career. The older you get, jazz, it's always there for you. Kind of hide some of your flaws maybe a little bit. Lonesome Day Blues is great. Again, Dylan's vocals, I think, are very assured and confident. It's not sourpuss blues, it's rompin' stompin' up-tempo blues, which I think is great. Another Tin Pan Alley kind of callback and floater, too much to ask. It's got that violin and mandolin in the breaks, which is really cool. Like it's just things that you wouldn't expect from a Bob Dylan album keep popping up here. And like I said, I can't remember anything since like Blonde and Blonde, Blonde on Blonde, where you get just all these interesting little things popping up that you wouldn't expect from a Bob Dylan album. And across the board, not just like on one song where it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting Bob to do this. It's pretty much every song has little moments like that. You're gonna hate this, but I think Moonlight sounds like a Billy Joel song. Not a critique. I don't think I've heard a more playful melody from Bob, and I love a playful melody. I think it's great. The band has a nice little light touch, just a little light shuffle. Got some real dreamy guitar on it. It's the perfect invocation of romance and moonlight, is what I wrote. And I think I stand by that. I wrote that a while back, so I can't exactly remember if that's true, but I think that's a nice little description there. Honest with Me might be my least favorite track. It feels a little generic with the blues. Might be the only track on here that I was just kind of, okay, this is all right, but the blues stuff not always my favorite. Po' Boy, another kind of Tin Pan Alley crooner, a little jazzy, a little croony. Dig it, Bing Crosby vibes on that one. And man, there's a lot of tracks on here. Cry, A While, cool. Feels like it's shifting tempos, even though it's not, which is cool. I remember
Yeah, it
thinking about,
shifts between it shifts between like
yeah,
the shuffle and the straight, eight
yeah,
notes and everything. Yeah, it's really
very
cool.
interesting feel to that one. And then Sugar Baby might be the only one that has like the Lanois-ness still. There's like a echo to everything, a lot of reverb on it, a little mysterious, nighttime vibes, accordion. But Bob shifts into a real like modern vocal for the chorus when he does the Sugar Baby Down the Line part, which kind of takes you out of the Lanois-ness of it and kind of back to the present, which Lanois is not in usually. And yeah, I just think it's a really, really strong album. It feels like Dylan in the now. It doesn't feel like them, producers trying to be like, well, Dylan, remember what you did on Blonde on Blonde? Like, remember back in the 70s and 60s? Like, we want you to do that, but here's some 80s production on it. Like it feels like he's trying new things, like he's, you know, bringing himself into the present. And I think, his production is fantastic. I didn't think he was ever going to be a good producer because we've had moments where it's just like, come on, Bob, like that sucks. But finally, here in the 2000s, he finally gets it. It's a warm album, more humor in the lyrics. Band sounds great. Vocals sound great, and it's just a really good album. I don't know where this stands as far as lyrically compared to, whatever Time Out of Mind and Oh Mercy and going back. But I enjoyed the lyrics. I didn't get too deep into them because I was enjoying the music too much, which I always prefer. But yeah, he sounds unshackled here. He sounds alive and freer and more assured than he has since the 70s. So that's why I enjoyed this one, Love and Theft, so much. It's probably 4.5 stars. I think it's going to be like top 5 or 10 when it all comes down to it. I'd be surprised if it was out of the top five at this point. It's just a really good modern album, and yeah, but that's all I have to say about it. That's it. That's it.
You're a 1985 baby, right? So I'm 91, so I'm 6 years. It just doesn't feel right for me. Like I'm 6 years younger than you, but I still feel like a proud father right now. And my cheeks really hurt from smiling so much. I'm like trying to. Trying to stretch them back out. Ooh, Joe, well, well worth the wait to record this one. Oh,
I've
wow. If we,
I've had that inside me for like 2 months, and it's been like busting out. Like I can't.
you know, yeah, some people, will take umbrage to, your thoughts on the production and to a degree I get it because like I love Time Out of Mind and I love how Time Out of Mind sounds. I personally wouldn't change anything about it, but I equally love the sound of this record for, for different reasons. I think that they both serve their purposes for their respective albums. So I'm not gonna come at you for it. I'm I'm just so happy. I will say you went through pretty much every song. The one song you didn't talk about might be my favorite on the record, and that is High Water for Charlie Patton. So before I get into all my bits here, I just got it. I know how you feel about 11 of these 12 songs. I just need that 12th one.
You know what? I don't know because in the spot where I wrote my notes for High Water Rising, it's not. I didn't write the right song title. I just wrote High Water Rising, and that's it. So I don't know what I think about it. I think I liked it. I don't know
Very
why I
good.
would have skipped that one in particular. I don't know. Perhaps I
Well,
messed up my notes somehow or something, but
really, really staking our claim as a professional operation here. Well, it's
sounds
a ki-
great though. I'd love to hear you talk about it.
yeah, it's a killer tune. I mean, really ominous lyrics, kind of, not exactly like Man in the Long Black Coat, but kind of along those lines where, you know, very dark atmosphere, really unsettling banjo work from Larry Campbell, thunderous timpani rolls from David Kemper, who is terrific all across this record on the drums. Just a really cool recording of a really cool song. That one has always been a favorite, probably a top 20 Dylan song ever for me. I'm so happy with so much of what you just said, because I agree with so much of it. I think, you know, for whatever it lacks in terms of uh, time out of minds, atmosphere or like the thematic sort of darkness or whatever, to me, it just makes up for it by containing maybe the most sonically varied and musically rewarding group of songs in his entire discography. Not saying that they're the best songs in his discography, but I just think everything that he goes for and that the band goes for on this record, they rock and they glide and they rumble. They go every which way and they knock it out of the park. And for my money, this group is the single best recording outfit he's ever had. And I say that with all due respect to the amazing groups and musicians that he's had on his records. And, certainly if you were looking at them, divorced from Dylan, then yeah, you'd say the band. But, I don't know. I think this band sounds better on this record than the band does on Planet Waves, and that's not even a knock on Planet Waves. What what Charlie Sexton and Larry Campbell accomplish on this record, their dual guitar work is, I mean, such hot shit playing. Really, the only thing that you said that I disagree with is honest with me being your least favorite because I think the guitar playing on that song is just absolutely insane. I mean, I actually think that song is like the ballsiest, most relentlessly rocking piece of music that he's committed to tape since the Rolling Thunder Review. Um, and that is also due to, like I said, David Kemper on drums. fully being able to put all his power into it. And he proved his worth on Time Out of Mind as well, as did Tony Garnier on bass. Tony's been touring with him since 1990 or 89 at this point. I can't remember. But man, so much great, like, it falls under the blues umbrella, but to me, rock and roll music, Lonesome Day Blues, I mean, just an absolutely filthy shuffle. You know, the three note riff is so effective. The guitars are perfectly distorted without overbearing everything that's happening. And then, like you said, not as heavy, but that sort of rockabilly feel, that breezy, the way it glides and just moves like a snake through the grass, a lot of fans grew tired of this song because he like insisted on playing it every night for like 10 years. And especially after Charlie left the touring group, Charlie Sexton, which, I don't think you should say these relative unknowns because everyone knew Archangels in the 90s, surely, come on. Him and Doyle Bramhall. But yeah, once Charlie left the group, that song kind of lost some of its magic, but the recording of it on this, it's just so much hopped up energy, great playing, and for as well as they execute these numbers, they pull off these ballads and these mid-tempo songs with total skill, and sometimes it's that thing where you get a great rock and roll band in the studio and then you try to get them to do a ballad or a swing or a shuffle, and they just can't fully get there, because they're just good at rocking, or vice versa. You get a band that's really good at sort of the tempered stuff, and then when you try to push them, they don't know how to fully get there. These guys can go from Honest with Me and Lonesome Day Blues into a song like By and By, the nicest, breeziest feel to that. Again, I totally agree. Moonlight, just a gorgeous piece of guitar swing that doesn't sound anything like Billy Joel. Po' Boy, um, I think one of the most impressive chord progressions he's ever written. And the group fleshes it out really well. And then one of my favorite songs, also kind of in this vein, I love Floater, Too Much to Ask. And this is where we should, I guess, talk about the plagiarism thing, the good old plagiarism conversation, which there's a lot of tracks on this record that feature lyrical and musical nods to other songs and sources, which this is a common theme throughout Bob's career and most musicians' careers. A lot of the talk around this record, there's a book, Confessions of a Yakuza by Chunichi Saga, I believe is how you say his name. He interpolated several lines or passages into like five different tracks, and it's one of those. Yeah, I kind of have mixed feelings about his willingness, especially in recent years, to sort of you know borrow or steal these ideas without accreditation. Because it's been commonplace in Western music, since the very beginning, and given to the level that Bob usually elevates his borrowed ideas, I find myself, for better or worse, giving him a pass quite often, especially because you talk about the folk and the blues tradition, yada, yada, yada. But I do think it's a conversation that should be had. And Floater, Too Much to Ask is like the one song where it's like, okay, he kind of takes a few lines here and there in a couple other songs, but in that song, he's taking like over half a dozen passages, and then musically and melodically, a lot of it is lifted from this a 30 standard, snuggled on your shoulder. To me, it's not the same as him doing what he was doing in the 60s because that was a different time. Now it's 2001. I think you got to give credit where credit's due. I also don't think it's necessarily a black and white conversation, given Bob's age, when he grew up, these sorts of things. I think we should talk about it, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to pretend I don't love the song. I think it's easy to get lost, trying to justify something you enjoy, considering what's artistically moral and, compartmentalizing what you value and understand about an artist, yada, yada, yada. As it currently stands, I feel comfortable loving the hell out of it and acknowledging that we should have these conversations. We're going to have more of these conversations in the next record too. But it's a killer song, and there's also so much unbelievable lyricism across this record. I wouldn't call this Bob's maybe the high point of his lyricism. I think you got to look at albums like Bring It All Back Home and Blood on the Tracks for that. But this is a funny album, and you can tell listening to these songs that he and the band are having so much fun playing them, and that's kind of mirrored in the lyrics. Summer Days and Po' Boy are both, they're just devilishly funny. Like you said, like it's been a long time since he's been this, there's some stuff on Under the Red Sky that's kind of funny, but you kind of don't know whether you're supposed to laugh at it or not. There's certainly nothing on Time Out of Mind that is ha ha funny, maybe a line here or there, but I think that humor is a very integral part of his songwriting, going back to the beginning, looking at those early records, the Talkin' Blues numbers. There's all over the Electric trilogy, there's so much humor. And you hear it in these songs. There's some good dad jokes in there, I think in By and By, where he says, I'm sitting on my watch so I can be on time and stuff like that. Po' Boy, I go down to the store. Man says, "Have you got $3?" I say, "Will you take four?" And he's like trying to like fit in like 1,000 syllables where they don't belong, and it's very clearly intentional. And then there's sort of like this funny juxtaposition. In Honest with Me, it's got this fierce rock and roll stamina, but then it's got these really heartbroken lyrics like my parents, they warned me not to waste my years, and I still got their advice oozing out of my ears. On top of all that, you've got the closing track, Sugar Baby, such a sobering, thought-provoking note to go out on. Every moment of existence seems like some dirty trick. Happiness can come suddenly and leave just as quick, which sort of reminds you, like, oh yeah, firstly, this is Bob Dylan. And secondly, yeah, he's lived enough life where when he says that stuff, you really take it to heart and you mean it. And then the crowning jewel, of course, from a lyrical standpoint, is Mississippi. Just an extraordinary composition. It's such a mature reflection on regret that I think, deserves to be mentioned alongside his all-time greatest lyrical achievements, up there with your Visions of Joanna's and your Sad-Eyed Ladies of the Lowlands, your Joker Mans. Like I mentioned in the last episode, I think that initial Time Out of Mind era demo slash alternate take is actually my preferred version of it. That song is a top 10 Dylan recording for me. But this one is also still so fantastic. Great guitar and bass work all across it. Garnier actually really, really shines on Mississippi. And yeah, and I agree with you. I think he's got just the right amount of this like seasoned rasp, handling that melody. And in general, yeah, I really like his vocals on this record. I think that he I think that he sounds really spirited. I think he sounds powerful. I think he belts out the rockers with that sort of robust growl, and the more melodic songs, the crooners, he's very confident in them, and he's not just, rasping and growling his way through them. There's the rasp in his voice, but he's very intentional with his melodies, and great melodies on this record, it should be said. By and By, Po' Boy, Moonlight, all of them. I think it's fantastic. I loved this album when it came out, and I've been listening to it nonstop for the last 2 decades, and nothing has diminished the reverence that I have for it. I think that the soundscapes, which are so, like you said, so diverse, and that is something that I also very much value. And just its infectious spirit really lend to its returnability. I think it's similar to why, going back, what seems like ages ago now, I'm very high on New Morning, one of my pet Dylan albums, and I view Love and Theft in a similar way, and both of them are, yeah, almost like Happy Bob albums. Not every song is happy, but you can tell there's just he's come out of some stuff and he has this well-earned confidence. And I understand and respect why a lot of people hold Time Out of Mind up as like sort of the crowning achievement of his career renaissance and everything. And it to a degree I do too, but I'm with you. This is my favorite collection of his since the 1970s. And it's almost an hour long, but I think it totally flies by. Every song I think is magnificent, and I'm very, very happy that you related to this one too.
Yeah, I mean, I think this might be his best sounding album that he ever put out. Like, when you said that, I had to think back. He recorded with Mike Bloomfield and he recorded with the band, and he's recorded with all these different, outfits and producers. And yet, in a year where Linkin Park broke, I think this might be the best overall sounding just across the board. I mean, his vocals aren't what they used to be in terms of, never that great. But I mean, even in his advancing age, with his vocals being ragged and old sounding, I still was taken aback by how good he sounded, just in our, chronologically speaking, I didn't think he sounded that great on Time Out of Mind. I thought like, okay, the cracks are beginning to show. Like this could be the end. And I don't know, maybe it's the confidence, maybe it's, his engineering hire, Chris Shaw, who he really liked and wanted, modern sounding vocals. They just sound better. Like they sound fuller, they sound more confident. He sounds like he's having more fun. Like it all feeds into the spirit of this album. And I think that was very infectious listening to it. Like it's not mopey. It's not like a happy album, but it's not a mopey album. And it sounds like he's having fun. It sounds like the band's having fun and just ripping through some really great, great tunes. I agree with Bob. It's a greatest hits album without the hits. But the diversity in the sound, everything about it, just, made me really enjoy it. And it's been tough sitting on it for like, a month or whatever. I listened to this album so long ago. It was like it was the week after we recorded Time Out of Mind, which is a long time ago. And then we had a bunch of things come up and we couldn't record this episode. And I was a little afraid to listen to it again and be like, oh wait, nope, I hate it now. I don't like Bob. This sucks. Fortunately, that did not happen. I only enjoyed it more the second time, third time, whatever. So yeah, I'm glad I'm not alone on this island here. Really appreciating Love and Theft. And yeah, Bob steals some stuff, but it's right in the title. It's that. I mean, put it right in there.
Yeah.
I
I
love
am
it. Cool. It's theft.
I am concerned that you've now brought up Linkin Park twice in this episode. What are you
Trying to think what else came out in 2001.
are
I
you
don't know if this is gonna be tough to beat The Blueprint for me because that is one of my favorite, perhaps my most favorite rap album of all time. So, albums released on September 11th, 2001. It might not even be my favorite, but I still think it's a great 4.5 star album.
I'm trying to think of what else came out
A Silver
that
Side Up by Nickelback, which
oh, I did own that when I was a young boy. Um,
actually, it's terrible to say this, but that was a hell of a day for music. Rockin' the Suburbs, also out on
Ben
that day.
Folds, yeah. Yeah,
Satellite by POD.
you got your live Dream Theater record I'm seeing here.
Glitter by Mariah Carey. Like it was just a really strong day.
But I'm telling you that John Hiatt record, the Tiki Bar is open. Definitely got to check that out. Yeah, I'm also happy to hear that going back to you had that experience because I remember you saying that was like the one like semi knock that you had on Saved was that you thought it was very immediate, and then when you went back to it the second time, you kind of felt like you had gotten all of it. And yeah, this is one where there's just so much happening musically. And I think, especially because of the production, because everything is so clear, I definitely think there's a lot that you'll get on repeated listenings. Yeah, everything it's not this like insane production technique or anything or engineering technique. I mean, like everything is like I said, pretty close mic'd, relatively dry sounding. You can pick everything out, but because it's just recorded so well and then played so well, it's just sort of like for me, it just hits me like a ton of bricks every time. And that makes me even more interested to see what you're going to think of our next record, 2006's Modern Times, because that is a record that simultaneously, I think, continues this sort of blueprint set on this record of Bob's confidence and the band's, you know, ability and professionalism, while also not really sounding that much like it, I don't think. Certainly at this point, Bob is kind of done with a lot of musical experimentation. Like, you kind of knew getting into the 80s, like, oh, the synths are going to creep in at some point, and, so on and so forth. I mean, from here on out, it's like, don't expect to be hearing any trap beats once we get into the mid 2010s, especially because that's the Sinatra era. So, that would also just be conflicting. So, not reinventing the wheel, but stylistically, Modern Times, I do think is a bit of a shift away. I know that it is a favorite specifically of your old co-host Ryan Kramser's, but do you have any experience with Modern Times?
Not a one. Absolutely nothing. 2006, that's a big gap. So I'm worried about that. 2006, I was listening to Muse, My Chemical Romance. So yeah, I missed Modern Times.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, in addition to not really sounding like Love and Theft, it also doesn't sound like The Black Parade or what was the music? Was that Black Holes and Revelations?
it
There we
was.
go. See, I got it up there. There's a great Tom Waits release from that year that you should really check out. It's a 3 CD set if you're looking for 3 CDs worth of new Waits material.
Well, if I listen to that before I listen to Modern Times, I'll probably give Modern Times 5, 6, 7 stars. So
Consider it. It's called Orphans, Brawlers, Ballers, and Bastards. The third disc is all experimental stuff,
yeah. Oh,
including
baby.
including his cover of Hi Ho, which is not to be missed. So listen to that and then
Enormous.
listen to Modern Times.
Yes, I'm not going to be doing that, but I will be listening to Modern Times, and I will be interested to find out what I think about it because yes, 5 years. You're not making me super excited for it. I gotta say, the whole Ryan Kramser thing is a big. That's like a -5 points.
Come on, you guys saw eye to eye on some things.
Nothing after the year 1995.
Gotcha.
So
I also like that we are talking about him as if he's dead. Um,
he's not very much alive.
no. If you're watching this, Cram, what's up? But yeah, the only thing I'll tell you to keep in mind here is I would like you to see if you can sort of pick up on that confidence that Bob has, both in his songwriting abilities as well as his production abilities that he clearly gained on this record. And I really do think that he he needed to go through everything he went through to get here, including making Time Out of Mind, which even though you're not as high on it as everyone else, I think he needed that one last opportunity for someone else to kind of guide him. You know, he had the songs again and he was starting to clear up. You know, at this point, I believe he's if he's still doing any, boozing or drugs, it's definitely way, way less. By the mid 90s, that's when the live shows start getting a lot better. That's clearly when he's writing better material again. So he's clearing up there. I think he needed that experience with Time Out of Mind to be like, great, this was a success. The songs are good, but it didn't sound the way I wanted it to. I know what I want to do now, and I know that I can afford to do it. And I do think that that continues through modern times, albeit in a slightly different way. So I would just keep that in mind.
Okay, I will. Makes me more hopeful for it. The whole Lanois thing, it's a good point. He had to hate it and figure out what he wanted to do after hearing it and being disappointed in his vocals. So, and I felt the same way. And he rebounded with Love and Theft. So let's see where he goes with Modern Times. We got a 5 year gap in the timeline for that. So that's interesting. Hopefully, it won't take us 5 years to get that episode out. It might. So we'll see. And that's okay. That's it. That's it for Love and Theft. I don't want to see any naysayers in the comments. Apparently, I've been living amongst them in our own Discord. That kind of bums me out. I don't know what these people are hearing. But leave your thoughts on Love and Theft in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. People were being like, well, why would you subscribe to the channel now? We still have like a quarter of Dylan's output to get through. Like we got shows and shows, people. This ain't ever ending. This is the never ending podcast. Uh, so yeah, subscribe to the channel. There'll be many more episodes to talk about your least favorite Dylan albums, whatever. Check out the description for links to our social media accounts. Join our Patreon. You can check out the Discord where we never go a day, never gone a full day without talking about Bob Dylan at some point in some channel. And check out Taste Like Records and purchase Nordista Freezes on the Banks of Disappearing, produced by our very own Jason Reese. That's it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in modern times.